So this will be our last video on the types of what hypersensitivity reactions. And this one will be looking at what the type 4 hypersensitivity reaction and examples of what disease conditions that actually what have this type of what reaction. So we'll take it slow and steady, all right, with very simplified notes, all right, and basically guys to understand everything about the type 4. So it was asked in an exam, students were asked what discuss type 4 hypersensitivity reactions with relevant examples. Okay, so let's move. I could say that the type 4 reaction is mediated by what? The helper and the cytotoxic T cells. All right, the helper T cells and the cytotoxic T cells are the cells that basically what mediate this type of what reaction. Okay, so now moving now, we say that what the hypersensitivity type 4 reaction, this is an immune reaction that is mediated by the antigen activated, okay, in bracket sensitized T lymphocyte, right? That's basically T lymphocyte that have encountered that antigen before. Okay, so the antigen coming for the second time now, the activation is way so large. Okay, so it's an immune reaction that is mediated by antigen activated T lymphocyte. That's what the CD4 and the CD8 T cells, right? So it is actually induced by what environmental and self antigens and can be a cause of what inflammatory diseases. Okay, so the CD4 T cells have been implicated in most autoimmune disease, right? CD8 T cells are involved in what viral infections, right? So all these are points that we'll be building on. Okay, so you can see this type 4 mediated hypersensitivity, and this is basically by the what the T cells, right? So moving now, let's talk about cellular events. Okay, so these cellular events basically involve antigen recognition, activation of cells, okay, to further proliferation, differentiation, and also the mechanism of killing for the cells. Okay, so the cells involved are the what CD4 and the CD8 T cells. So for the CD4 T cells now, they proliferate into either what the T helper 1 subset or the T helper 17 subset. Okay, and all this will talk about the mechanism of how each one of them actually comes to play. All right, and this is depending on the cytokine that is produced by the antigen presenting cells. Okay, while the CD8 T cells now, they carry out what cytotoxic killing. Okay, they don't really differentiate into different types of helper cells. Right, so now let's talk about, we've spoken about cellular events. Let's talk about what antigen recognition. How does these cells actually get to recognize the antigens? I would say that naive CD4 T cells, they recognize peptides displayed by what dendritic cells. Okay, so now these CD4 T cells become activated and they produce what interleukin 2. Now this interleukin 2 functions to stimulate proliferation of what antigen responsive T cells. Okay, so antigen presenting cells now also secrete what cytokines at the time of what T cell activation, which causes what differentiation of the antigen stimulated T cells to either T helper 1 or T helper 17. Okay, now let's talk about activation of lymphocyte now. Now, when the antigen presenting cells, that's basically dendritic cells or macrophages, when they produce interleukin 12, the CD4 T cells will proliferate into the what? T helper cell type 1. Okay, now the T helper cell type 1 further secretes what? Interferon gamma to cause further proliferation. Okay, so now when these antigen presenting cells produce interleukin 1, interleukin 6 or interleukin 23. They produce interleukins combined with what? Tissue growth factor beta and CD4 T cells to proliferate into the what? T helper cells type 17 subset. Okay, so now the differentiated effector cells enter circulation and some remain in the memory pool. Okay, so now let's talk about the response of these effector cells now. The type 1 cells, they basically secrete what? Cytokines and mainly what? The interferon gamma. Okay, so they are responsible for many manifestations of delayed type of what? Hypersensitivity. Okay, then interferon gamma activates what? Macrophages. Now activated macrophages have marked augmented what? Ability to phagocytose and kill microbes. Okay, so now they also express more class 2 major histocompatibility molecules, and they facilitate more antigen presentation. Okay, so now this type 1 helper uh, T cells, they also secrete what? Tissue necrosis factor, interleukin 1, chemokines to induce inflammation. All right, and they also produce what? Interleukin 12, and thus amplifying what? T helper 1 type of what? Response. Okay, so the T helper type 17 now, what is their function mainly? These cells are activated by the microbial agents or self-antigens in autoimmune diseases. Now, activated T helper 17 will secrete what? Interleukin 17 and interleukin 22. They also secrete what? Chemokines and other cytokines. Okay, so now these substances recruit neutrophils and monocytes to the vicinity of the reaction and they promote inflammation. Right. So the T helper 17 cells also produce what? Interleukin 21, which further amplifies the T helper 17 cell response. Okay, so now let's talk about the response of what? The CD8 T cells now. The CD8 T cells or the CD8 cytotoxic lymphocyte, they kill antigens bearing target cells. Right? So now if you have a cell that is bearing the antigens, the CD8 cells basically act on this cell. Okay? So now these cells act against viral infected cells, transplanted grafts, and even normal body cells. All right? Now viral peptides are displayed by the class 1 major histocompatibility complex. Now the complex, complex. Now the complex is recognized by the what? T cell receptor, that's a TCR of the CD8 cytotoxic lymphocyte. All right. Now, lastly, let's talk about the mechanism of killing. Then examples. So for the mechanisms of killing now, we say that T lymphocyte kill by perforins and granzymes. Okay, preformed mediators, all right, which are formed in the lysosome like granules of T cells. Okay, so T lymphocytes secrete a complex that is composing of perforins, granzymes, and cell glycines. Okay, so the complex enters target cells through endocytosis. Now, perforins facilitate release of granzymes. All right, so granzymes cleaves and activate caspases to induce apoptosis. Okay, so now T lymphocyte express what? Fast ligands that bind to fast in target cells and therefore trigger apoptosis. Okay, so now we'll be talking about examples of medical conditions that basically have this type 4 hypersensitivity reaction. Contact dermatitis, all right, have this type 4 reaction. Tuberculosis reaction, right, have this. Granulomatous inflammation, all right. Granulomatous inflammation has this. Let me take it down in case you want to look at the characteristics, but I already have videos on granulomatous. Then multiple sclerosis, also has this type of what? Type 4 hypersensitivity reaction. Type 1 diabetes also has this. Okay, this is tuberculine reaction. Type 1 diabetes also has what? This type 4 hypersensitivity reaction. The rheumatoid arthritis. Rheumatoid arthritis also had this what? This type 4 hypersensitivity reaction. Okay, so guys, on that basis now, that's what type 4 hypersensitivity reaction and examples of what disease conditions that have this type of what hypersensitivity reaction. So that's it, and bye for now.